Some people that have done this for 25 years said that was the worst they've ever seen because of the water. The water was the big one. They had big winds, but the water was the big damage. It just went over the top of houses, if you can believe houses. And people went up to the second floor for safety, and literally the water went over the house. But we mourn all of our fellow citizens who have lost their lives, and we're keeping their families in our hearts, and we'll continue to work with them. But praise be to God. I tell you, it's really...
That was Donald Trump at a rally in Wisconsin, doing what he does best, making himself look like and I really can't imagine who on his campaign staff is encouraging him to tell such a verifiable lie that President Biden and Vice President VP Harris have not been supporting the states affected by this hurricane. Yesterday we saw Governor Brian Kemp, certainly not a fan of President Biden, or Vice President VP Harris say that Donald Trump was lying when he said President Biden didn't call him, but still he pushes these lies because he doesn't care about the communities affected. He doesn't care about anyone but himself and his political game. And so he continues to lie, and a speech that should be about the economy or any sort of political message, Donald Trump, as always, just focuses on himself because that is all he is able to do. And in this edition of Donald Trump Loses It, his crowd was especially bored as he ranted and rambled about the most bizarre things, including complaint compling about his tiny crowd size, and we're going to check that out. But his crowd was just so bored, so stunned that it fell completely silent in the room, and we're going to check that out. But before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you enjoyed this channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way in supporting what we're doing now. Let's get into this first clip from the crazy speech.
We're doing great in the polls. They just came out with new ones. Rasmussen, we're really good. I mean, it took a little honeymoon, for 4 weeks you did nothing but hear about. She went from being the worst vice president in history. He's the worst president in history. It's the worst administration by far in the history of our country. Look at our border where people are pouring in and they're criminals and they're murderers and drug dealers. Look at what they've done. And then
You have to know that you're losing. If you're Donald Trump, if you're talking about RM polls, if it's the only thing you can cite, if you go to Donald Trump's Truth Social page, and I do it far too often, he is always posting screenshots from Twitter polls or Truth Social polls that show him winning by 94% because he's just looking for any indication that he is succeeding in this race, but he is not. Of course, and Ras M is just such a biased conservative pollster. The fact that he's citing that just should show us how scared he is and how much he knows he is down. Because if he could find a reliable poll to point to, he would, but he can't. And so he has to point to the conservative bias nonsense. And of course, still complaining about how the polls are rigged, even though he's winning. Just classic line from Trump there. And the complaints continued when, like I said earlier, he started to discuss the tiny and increasingly shrinking President Obama motion right there. Size of his crowds blaming President Biden. Again, let's just check it out.
We were up here on Saturday. We had a group, Tommy, I think it was maybe 50 or 60,000 people. And because we were not afforded the luxury of having enough security not because of Secret Service, but because of Washington, I spoke in front of about 700 people, and 50 or 60,000 people weren't able to see. And I think they still love me, but we have to make sure. We have to make sure. And you know what that was? That was the political opponent saying, we don't want him to have a crowd like that.
We are less than 40 days out from this election. In his closing message, Jesse Waters on Fox said, Donald Trump is a fourth quarter player. He's clutch. He closed as strong. But his closing message is his crowds are small. And it's Joe Biden's fault. Now, we can talk about how crazy and off message Donald Trump always is, but let's make a real and significant point out of this. If this guy who's campaigning not just for president, because he's really campaigning to avoid going to jail, can't focus on a single thing during his campaign, How could he focus when he was president? How could he focus on the issues that matter most to us, not him during his presidency? He couldn't. He didn't. The first time. Why would he the second time when he's even more deranged? And speaking of how deranged he is, like I said earlier, his crowd was just stunned into silence by this weird rant that he went on classic of these weird Trump rallies, but you can just hear the deafening silence in the room as Donald Trump rambles, and I want to check that out.
Don't do that in the military. You take your orders. I said, that's a strange. I don't know if that's a good system or bad. In one way, it's good, but in a lot of ways, it's probably bad. I said, so what? Do you know how to do it? Yes, sir, I do. So how long would it take? We've been fighting them for years, and they say it would take 5 years to get rid of them. How long? We can do it in 4 weeks, sir. What? We can knock them out in 4 weeks. I said, 4 weeks? You got to understand, these guys are like central casting. He had a drill sergeant that was better looking and tougher than any guy you could ever put into a movie. You know, we've had a couple of them. Have you ever seen where the drill sergeant goes in and he has these actors, big name actors, and he's trying to teach them how to become a drill sergeant. In the movie, he's a drill sergeant. And after about 5 minutes, the actor said, I could never do that. Because it's a different level, okay, of toughness. And one movie, what was that great movie that was made where a Full Metal Jacket?
Gavin Noem makes this point so well, and I took issue with it a little bit the first time that I heard it, but then I realized he was so right that this guy is boring. I never found Trump in his fear-mongering and his anger and his divisiveness entertaining, but it certainly isn't any more so than it was in 2016 or 2015. This guy's just boring. The crowd isn't cheering. They're not clapping. They're not into it. They're sitting there silently, some of them leaving, some of them asleep, because he's just not fun to them anymore. And you can hear the silence in that room as he just meanders and start talking about Full Metal Jacket Donald. How about you just become a film critic instead of a failed president? And you could just save us all some time in a lot of sanity, which you are clearly lacking. And talking about sanity and the ridiculous things she said, this is an example of something Trump continues to say at his rallies that just doesn't make any sense that I want to check out.
By the way, isn't it nice to have a guy that doesn't need teleprompters to tell this stuff? You know, I'm going through all these names, and it's not part of my thing. I'm going through all these names. You think Biden could do that? I don't think so.
If you could sum up the essence of his lies, I think it is that clip right there. Something we continue to see from him saying, I don't need a teleprompter, I can speak without, as he points to them. I can speak without a teleprompter, and they're in the shot. We can see the teleprompters you're reading off of them. Like what? These are the lies. These are the bald-faced lies. It is the same thing as when he said President Biden hadn't called Governor Kemp, and of course he had. Governor Kemp had just said that these are verifiable lies. It's what he does. It's all he talks about himself, his lies. And then, of course, you got to sprinkle in a little bit of fear-mongering, which is exactly what Donald Trump did right here.
We're here. There's so many people outside, which we appreciate, but a lot of people were here a short time ago. Iran launched 181 ballistic missiles at Israel, and I've been talking about World War III for a long time, and I don't want to make predictions because the predictions always come true. We're not going to make, but they are very close to global catastrophe. We have a non-existent president and a non-existent vice president.
Now, I think that national security and foreign policy as a topic in this race is about to get much more important. So let us all as a community remind the people in our lives that Donald Trump's, of course, 40 out of his 44 cabinet secretaries, his chief advisors. Those people are not coming out and supporting him. But the largest group that is coming out and saying that Donald Trump is a danger to our country and our world, our planet, were his national security advisors. Those are the people who have come out against him most to say, this guy cannot be trusted with the nuclear codes again. And so if there is increasing global conflict, do we really want this person at the helm? This is the guy we trust. The I don't need teleprompters as he's reading off of them guy, the Hannibal liqueur guy, the windmills and McDonald's guy. No, I don't think so. And if that didn't scare you enough, this certainly should.
We should get there based on military victory, not because of that. But you could keep these people like that fought for me so brilliantly, you could put them in a woke cage. We call it a woke cage for 2 years, scream at them, only woke stuff. And when they come out, they'll say, let's go USA, let's go MAGA. They'll say, we want MAGA. They won't be convinced. They won't be convinced. Tommy, they're not going to be woke. I guarantee you. I met them. They're not wokesters.
Now, of course, Donald Trump is trying to frame this as a woke versus MAGA argument. But the reason why he is so angry with our generals, and especially Mark Milley, is because when Donald Trump wanted to shoot protesters in the legs, basic no. When they said, no, Donald, you can't shoot people for peacefully protesting, that really set him off. That's why he's so angry, because he couldn't stage a military coup, because he couldn't send him after Mike Pence, or after peaceful protesters, or after any of our rights that he wants to strip away. And so that should scare us, as we always talk about with Project 2025. It's not just the policies, it is the people. Donald Trump will surround himself with, think of Michael Flynn back in the Oval Office. That should scare us all. That should scare us all. And we are going to keep talking about that and calling it out every single day on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button if you haven't already, and leave a like on this video. And if you're stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon.